Hello, my name is Jay Feinstein. I manage podcast production for CitySpace Productions, which is our custom content studio here at WBUR. We produce podcasts for our partners, and one of those partners is the Ravi K. Mehrotra Institute for Business, Markets, and Society at Boston University Questrom School of Business. So we produce a podcast with the Mehrotra Institute called Is Business Broken? It's a podcast that looks at the thorny questions necessary for this moment about the role business should play in society. That's questions like, how is AI shaping our relationship with our doctor? Or what happens when businesses regulate themselves? Or today's question, how does an idea transform into a technology, into a company, or even an entire economy? So this is a live podcast recording of that conversation. So if you like what you hear, follow Is Business Broken wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or many other platforms. And before we get started, I have a few reminders. First is look out for the nearest emergency exit in case there's an emergency. And number two, please silence your cell phones. With that, I want to hand over the mic to Marcel Rindesbacher. He is the interim head of the Questrom School of Business at Boston University.
Yeah, good morning. It's a real pleasure to have here on this live recording of our podcast. I was the former director of the Mehrotra Institute, and I'm the dean ad interim of Questrom. And the topic we are talking today is really important. The sort of initiation of this was sort of like the commemoration of the patent for the telephone by Alexander Graham Bell 150 years ago. Alexander Graham Bell was a BU professor who worked on research not related directly to the phone, and it became this big kind of innovation, the phone, that transformed society. Today or so, I think there's a lot of stress to the system that was established after the Second World War on the invention machine. What is the role of the government? What is the role of universities? What is the role of private sectors? What are the kind of geopolitical tensions that we see? And I'm really happy to have an excellent panel here that will talk about this. We, in our conversations at the Mehrotra Institute, always try to represent academia, then policy making, industry as well, to really have an informed discourse about these societal challenges. So it's a real pleasure to introduce Kurt Nickisch and the panelist here. He is our voice of this podcast, and I'm pretty sure that hopefully you will find the podcast on Spotify or Apple and listen to all the episodes that we have produced in the past, if you don't do so already. So thank you so much.
Well, hello, everybody. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. I am Kurt Nickisch, and here with just a really stellar panel. Starting here to my right, Dr. Melissa Gilliam, president of Boston University. We have Liz Jurinka in the middle there, operating director, healthcare policy at Vistria, PRG. This is a private equity firm, but not kind of out of stereotypical private equity casting, right? There's a real social innovation bent
That's
to
right.
it. Okay.
Impact focused.
And then Kendalle Burlin O'Connell, the CEO and president of MassBio, which represents biotechnology organizations throughout Massachusetts. Massachusetts Biotechnology Council is the full title.
That's correct. Yeah, we are the life science trade organization for Massachusetts. We represent about 1,700 member companies. So smallest biotech startup, largest biopharma, everything in between.
Well, I'm thrilled to get to talk about kind of the American model of innovation, how it has changed over time, but how it's changing today and what we're working towards. And I can't think of a better group to talk to about this. So thanks so much for being here. And can we please just give this panel an advance round of applause? Now, when we talk about invention, we tend to picture the lone genius, and the famous one here at BU was Alexander Graham Bell, in a lab making the first phone call right here in Massachusetts 150 years ago. But breakthroughs rarely happen alone anymore. There's no kind of eureka moment per se like back then. They emerge from ecosystems, universities, government funding, venture capital, industry, regulation, even how insurance reimburses payments for healthcare, for instance. So let me start with a deceptively simple question for all of you. In one sentence, like, where does innovation actually begin today? Yeah, go ahead.
I will start.
Yeah.
At least in biotechnology, I think that innovation begins when there is a patient with a need, with an unmet medical need. So many of the men and women who work in biotech have dedicated their career to helping to bring hope and solutions to patients, and there's still so much work to do there. So I think it comes out of curiosity and the compellingness of helping somebody who is putting their hope in this industry.
Liz?
I think similarly but different. I think innovation or invention starts with an idea. It's not about the ecosystem yet. It's this idea that maybe you see the world a certain way, or you see a problem, whether it's a widget or a concept or a structure, and there is an interest or an idea to do that differently. I don't think we see the ecosystem until maybe further up on the channel.
Okay, it starts with an imperfect world, which we're living in, apparently. Dr. Gilliam.
So I'll paraphrase Zig Ziglar to say it's preparation, opportunity, but I'll also say resources.
Okay, that very important. Money kind of brings oxygen to the conversation right away, right? Thank you for bringing that in. I want to make sure that we also get your questions into this as well. We'll have time at the end for questions. But if you have a question now, I'm glad to bring it into the flow of the conversation, so don't wait. You just go to slido.com and enter CitySpace, one word, and we'll get as many questions in as we can. So, Dr. Gilliam, when we hear the word inventor, right, we think of that certain archetype, maybe Bell, right? Could the next Bell then be in a BU classroom? Maybe not right now after commencement, but at BU right now, what does an inventor or an invention fundamentally look like today?
Sure. So there is a tendency to think about the lone scientist. I think about it a little bit like music. Sure, there are soloists, and then there's also chamber music, and then there's orchestras. But rarely is an individual, especially at this moment in time and the complexity of the types of questions that we're solving, rarely is it an individual working alone. The inspiration, the ideas, the complementarity comes from a group of faculty, in a university setting, a group of faculty, staff, and students whose ideas are bouncing off of one another. So it might be an individual who has the training and the preparation to push an idea forward or to be the PI on a grant, but I think of it as a really collaborative process.
Yeah. Kendall, you're nodding there.
Yeah, I'd love to take that into sort of what Massachusetts brings to the table too, and why we are so uniquely positioned in this space. And it is because of that collaborative spirit that we have here. In my role, I have delegations coming from all around the country and all around the world, and they say, how do we replicate what you've built here in Massachusetts in the life sciences? And it is because, and often they have key ingredients that we have, right? We have over 100 academic institutions here. We have our world-class hospitals. We have the richest density of biotechnology, and we have 18 of the top 20 biopharma with a physical presence here. But it's that harmony that all of us are working together to support these inventions and this innovation. It's an ecosystem that has come together. And I think an inflection point on that is obviously incredible science coming out of our academic institutions. But our government really bet on this industry here in Massachusetts in 2008 with the Life Science Initiative, which was a $1 billion 10-year investment. And you can directly correlate the growth of this industry to that strategic investment. It's grown by 114% from an employment perspective since that time. And it's been reauthorized twice in 2018 for about $640 million, and then most recently under the Healy administration in 2024. So it really is this concentrated collaborative effort of all stakeholders that bridge that gap from an idea to a successful company at scale and then to a solution for patients.
It's interesting how Bell, even, 150 years ago, came from Scotland through Canada, chose Boston as the intellectual capital, essentially, of the United States as the place to research and pursue ideas. So in some ways, maintaining that today, I love this image of a symphony because you do have a director, but you also have staff behind. You have people paying to go to the symphony. It's a complex market as well as an artistic product. So let's talk a little bit about the money and the direction of that today. We can point to the telephone, we can point to mRNA, we can point to photonics, and see inventions that are now having payoffs. But a lot of the research doesn't start out that way, right? It starts out as foundational, general knowledge of that we're trying to improve human understanding. Bell was working on a hearing aid, his mother was deaf. And these lead to other things. So there's this general foundational research. There's also applied research where you see a commercial application and just take it from there. You need both. What's the right mix? What balance should we be thinking about today? Dr. Gilliam, maybe. Yeah.
So in universities, we run the gamut. We go from cells to society and our types of research that sets us up for entrepreneurship, innovation, company formation. It's very tempting to say, what's the return on investment? I want to see these translate quickly to society. But what you have to remember is that there's often a very long lead time to getting to those discoveries. And there's a lot of serendipity. So in universities, we focus on something called curiosity-driven research. It's a place where we allow people to pursue things that matter, even if you cannot figure out what the application is. What we're now doing at our institution is we're focusing on something called convergent research. So you use the example of photonics. BU created something called neurophotonics, the combination of the study of light, but also thinking about how the study of light contributes to brain health. We created something called synthetic biology, how the insights of engineering can be used to advance biological processes. So convergence is this idea of bringing lots of fields together. So one of the reasons we're excited about that is that we're using the starting point of societal problems. And so I think this is where an additional opportunity is. So yes, you absolutely need curiosity-driven research. You can think about the AI and how many different things came together to get us to this point and how much of that was serendipity. But when you start to think about the purpose of this will be to solve big societal problems, that helps universities get much more translational, to think about how to communicate what they're doing, to think about the possible applications of what they're doing. And so there are still opportunities, even as we're doing the fundamental theoretical, to start to be a little more forward-thinking in better and maybe quicker execution and faster application, and then not missing the opportunities to use multiple modalities, not only research, but also company formation to scale the impact of what we're doing.
That's amazing. Liz, you're in venture capital, you're often taking things out of universities. So maybe this is where you can jump in and just talk about that translational importance.
Sure, and I guess one clarification is that we're actually after VC. So we're a couple steps even after that to say we have the proof of concept, something is actually working. We would like to responsibly scale it in a way that makes that thing or that service more accessible to others. But one thing that Dr. Gilliam said that I thought was particularly interesting is this notion of opportunity, and also the idea that sometimes things happen serendipitously, right? Some is very, very intentional and other things happen. And it reminds me, because our firm is Chicago-based, I just recently read Devil in the White City about the Chicago Fair. And in that, I know it's not Alexander Graham Bell, but in that was this other race, if you think, between George Westinghouse and Nikola Tesla and J.P. Morgan and Edison, and this idea of direct current versus alternating current. And all of a sudden, there was this opportunity where the World's Fair was going to bring millions of people through the doors to see these incredible inventions, obviously on the heels of the World's Fair in Paris. And yet, there's only one contract. And who's going to win the contract? Is it the contract that originally was going to be $1 billion? The folks at the fair said no way, and Edison and others at J.P. Morgan said fine, we'll give it 500,000, or not $1 billion, $1 million. Sorry, wrong century. But Westinghouse said no. I think that alternating current with Nikola Tesla is going to actually work, and they came in and they undercut the bid and they won the contract, and from then on, that paved the way for actual electricity in people's houses. But to this point about what's required to get there, how do you make access more accessible? Especially in rural America, it took decades for people to then have that AC current in their house. What was required? Loans for rural America, infrastructure to get it to people's houses. So people saw the opportunity and they saw the proof of concept on a bigger stage than in a lab, or maybe a university setting or wherever, in the patent office. But it didn't happen overnight. And I think that is now getting faster. That dissemination of that type of technology is getting faster as we become more advanced. But it is not something, no pun intended, where you can flip a switch. Do you like that? Do you like how?
Yeah, that's good. Kendall, where are the pain points today then? I mean, it was complex back then. It's complex today, even. Where are the big sticking points now?
Yeah, the pain points are sort of unique in the time period. So some of them haven't changed, right? At least in biotechnology, it is a incredibly risky business. 90% of companies fail. It costs about $2 to $3 billion and takes about 10 to 15 years to get an idea to a patient. And navigating the complexity of the system is really hard too, right? So you've got an idea out of academia, and fortunately, NIH historically has been great at betting on that early stage risky science, because we don't know where it goes, but it's shots on goal, and it has to happen early stage. And then it's, okay, now I've got an idea, I'm taking it out of academia, I'm gonna start a company, but now I need money to do that. How do I do that? And you need to get to proof of concept for investors to have interest in investing in you and know that there's an ROI on that, but you're in this kind of valley of death period. So that's always kind of been the unique challenge for what a biotech looks like. So now take the last couple of years, right? So COVID happened, and then there was all of this incredible interest in biotechnology, and we saw this huge influx of investment come into the industry with what you would call non-traditional investors, because investing in biotech is really risky, and you're probably going to lose your money. But when you win, one, patients win, and two, you get a great return on that. So a lot of those investors got burned, and so then the market got stagnant, right? And in order for the fluidity of the industry to work, every stakeholder in every stage has to be operating properly. So it was a tight market, and it was harder for those early stage biotechs to get that funding. And then the IPO market essentially closed. So there was no exit for those companies that were looking to go commercial. And then so that happened for a couple years. And then we had what happened from a policy perspective last year. And it was the most sort of convoluted, chaotic, complex policy environment that I'd seen in almost 2 decades of being in the industry. And it sort of hit the industry at every stage. So we had these challenges with NIH funding, which was like a couple years ago would have been a nuclear scenario. Then SBIR, which is an early stage funding mechanism for once you have a company, was set to sunset. And by the way, it did sunset for 9 months. Then you had major uncertainty with the FDA, right? Leadership changes, challenges in getting communication and timing, even your meetings were upended. Then you had downstream threats of tariffs and what did that mean for the industry? And then most favored nations, which is essentially price setting. So it created this stalled environment. So that's what is a unique challenge. And when you think about here in Massachusetts, our bread and butter are those early stage innovations, that earliest biotech, that risky research that's coming out of our companies. And I'll say right now, I've seen the softest pipeline of those pre-seed to seed stage companies that I've seen in 2 decades, which should be of great concern to all of us.
So let's talk about that political climate a little bit more. I mean, we're in it right now. Besides the cuts that you mentioned, besides the change in the treatment from the federal government, we're also just seeing generally like broad skepticism toward elite institutions. Are we entering a period where America is just generally less inclined to invest in long horizon innovation?
I can start. I always remind people that we came out of a pandemic, and it was an incredibly complicated time for this country, and the effects will continue to shake out. We're also at the same time at one of the most amazing moments in medical and health and other areas of innovation. If you think about everything from cancer therapy and other diseases and drug development that are being addressed by gene editing, immunotherapy, the advent of AI, this is an amazingly complex and interesting and important moment. So rather than getting overly pessimistic about what we're seeing at this exact moment, understand that this is a moment of disruption, and it's disruption because of technology, it's disruption because we are able to think and practice science in very new ways, and we're being forced to ask questions about the efficiency and the ways in which we conduct science.
Which is always fair.
Which is always fair. So yes, I absolutely, it is challenging to work in disruptive moments, but it is it's giving us an opportunity also to ask these foundational questions, and it is an important question. Are we going to invest in early stage research, the long game, and if so, how much? And we did one project here, which is called the URY campaign, because what we realized is that as researchers, as universities, we actually haven't done made a terrific job of explaining why we do what we do. And I think so many people, whether it's going to a doctor's office or going to a mechanic and you don't understand what the person just said to you, versus really feeling like your ideas, your concerns were listened to, and that the solutions are actually about you and your well-being. People walk away saying, I guess I got a good outcome, but I had a terrible experience. So trying to think about how we as universities better relate to people, better create inventions that apply to people in their everyday lives, that's what we've been working on. It's not saying something as simplistic that it's a communication problem, but there is a communication problem in helping people understand why fundamental research, these theories, why taking 10 years to do research, why so much of it is actually going to fail, why those things matter. And that is part of the challenge for higher education. It's the challenge for science. It's a challenge for healthcare. And that's something that we've started to take on as well.
Let me stick with you just for another moment, because photonics is like an amazing example of this, right? It's the pure research into this wild technology that now apparently has kind of profound implications for AI infrastructure, right, in data centers. Like if you can use photonics instead of electronics, like it could be a much more sustainable industry as we're really ramping up compute. So it's one of these technologies with opportunities that you just didn't bank on when you started working on it. But if the federal government backs off somewhat on funding uncertainty, universities are under more pressure now than ever. Can universities shoulder that risk? You have to change the narrative, but is it how feasible is it for universities to fill in if the federal government backs off?
Well, universities themselves can't fill in, right? Because we are funded by tuition dollars and philanthropy, and it doesn't fill the gap. So this is an incredible evolutionary moment for universities in the way that we do research. So part of it is making the case to say, your taxpayers, when you think about advocating for what your taxpayers do, I encourage you to think about the value of fundamental science. It can feel like, for example, that a vaccine was created very, very quickly, but that drew upon decades and decades of research so that we were able to take advantage of that opportunity when that question was needed. So there's the first piece. We have to advocate for people continuing to believe that science matters, research matters. I will tell you, when I travel around the world, governments are continuing to invest in universities because they say we want to catch up and we want to compete with the US. So that's the first piece. But then the second is, as I said, there is an evolutionary moment for universities where, we typically lose about 40 cents on the dollar every time we conduct research, right? Something has to pay for the buildings, the infrastructure, the people, the staff, all of the equipment that we use to conduct research. Can we close that, right? Can we do research that is more efficient? Those are questions. Then often we say the end product is writing a paper, but maybe the end product is also thinking about forming a company or thinking about the IP or thinking about the tech transfer and what's the time that it takes for a technology to transfer. So if we just push back and said, you're wrong, and the way we're doing it is absolutely right, we would be missing the promise of this moment. We absolutely need federal support. We need private support. We need the states to support us. But part of that is us continuing to make the case, but also making the shifts that are necessary. I don't think this is just a conversation with the federal government. I think it is a conversation with the American people, right, about do you believe in science? Are we serving your health? Is the pace of breakthrough, is that actually meeting the needs of people? So I think those questions are the ones that we want to focus on.
Yeah, the demand is still there, right, for solutions. Liz, on the commercial side, how should private investment change then in this moment? What new opportunities or problems are you thinking about?
Well, it's a great question, but also I'm nodding my head because what I hear Dr. Gilliam talk about is so similar. It doesn't just apply to universities. I think in general, this notion of the value proposition is essential whether you are a .org, a .edu, a .com, a .gov. The idea of where is it that we choose to spend our money, what are the metrics or the outcomes that we are holding ourselves accountable to, and what does that end goal look like? When I work with my colleagues on the investment side, when we are looking at a new thesis, right, the idea of what value is and what we bring to it is incredibly important. You wouldn't want, as someone investing in an investment shop, to say, we just throw our money at something that sounds good. No, you would want to go to an expert in the field, someone that understands what a particular market looks like or a service, because they have a track record of understanding how to grow, develop, shape, what have you, into something that is then more valuable over time. And what does that mean? Well, value can mean, yes, dollars and cents, but it also can mean a takeaway for a patient, a consumer, a student, whatever it is. That is bigger than when they first started. So we continue to do that. I think the other point though that's incredibly important is sometimes what is it that I think Rahm Emanuel stole from someone else? Never waste a crisis, right? When something looks like it's not going well, maybe there are opportunities there to do something a little bit differently. What is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. Who else is doing something that is challenging the status quo that actually might do it better than what we thought, right? Those are the types of things that, from a policy perspective, I spend a lot of time on. From an operating perspective, our companies spend a lot of time on, and we cannot get lazy on that, because at the end of the day, again, that value is twofold. Right? We want to bring value to the investors, but that value only happens when the thing that we are working on, the thing that we think we can do better, actually does get better. And so it's not, I know that's not a direct question about investing, it actually is a doubling down on kind of the core principles of looking for that opportunity that we think is durable. Now, that is not to say that if you are in the middle of an investment period, that things don't get a little rocky if all of a sudden, the investment thesis that you made gets upended, right? But that notion of being flexible and being able to kind of take those things as they come, figure out, get back down to basics, get back down to fundamentals, and say, why did we think that we were in this investment? Those fundamentals are probably still there. We just have to be able to potentially pivot, and maybe that takes a little bit longer to get there. But I still think if an individual, if a researcher, if a company has done their homework, the thing that they are testing is probably still worthwhile testing and actually seeing through. So again, I think that it gives me even greater clarity that you really have to understand why you are in something from the beginning in order to be able to see it through and become really expert at it.
Yeah, I want to stick with that, but let me just, it's interesting how you're talking about private industry adapting to kind of new realities. We have a question from the audience. Can private investments fund the same type of innovation you get through government-funded university research? And I assume that's still a no. As much as like you want to change to the moment, you just can't go fund foundational research, or is that actually possible?
Well, it's funny too, because I think oftentimes what I hear is the inverse, which is why can't government create something that private investment does? Right? The idea of saying, why do we need private capital when if we just gave all of this money, I used to hear this all the time, to the NIH, well, why couldn't they produce all of our drugs? And I think that also speaks to kind of a fundamental, I don't even think it's a disagreement, I just think it's maybe a wherewithal on what the various stakeholders do. I think depending on the investor, maybe there are some folks that invest in very seed, very, very brand new niche things. That's not my level of expertise, but I think that the idea that that research is all of a sudden going to be taken up by private capital, especially when we're looking at, 90% of the time there's a failure rate. That is not the type of investment that, state pensions, that teachers, that the folks that invest in us, they're not looking for a 90% failure rate, right?
There's a lot of reason people have day jobs.
Correct.
Yeah,
myself too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kendalle, Dr. Gilliam brought this up talking about other countries investing more in universities. Like, we're in a global market. Like, there's a global market for your industry for therapy production.
Yeah.
How are other places treating this problem today?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer both. I kind of want to hit on this, but I'm going to answer that.
Yeah.
I just won't accept the concept that government won't fund early stage funding. It just is illogical. And it's frankly, at least in biotechnology, we now know that biotechnology is a national security priority. So government has to continue to fund this earliest innovation. But I also think that every stakeholder has to think a little bit differently. And now I'm going to get to your current question. Mm-hmm. Because there is so much global competition. And so, 5 years ago, if I was on this stage, I would have been like, welcome to the best place in the world for life sciences. And we are still a leader, but the fact is that we're being outpaced right now. And China is a great example of that, and they're outpacing us in places as they hadn't. So during COVID, we were concerned that China was producing APIs, so the ingredients in pharmaceuticals, and we didn't independently have that here. But now they're creating assets, and not just generic assets, advanced modalities. Well, that's what we're known for doing here in Massachusetts. That should be of utmost concern to us. In 2025, they outpaced our drug development pipeline, the United States, fourfold. And not just with drug development now, also with clinical trials. And why is that important to us here in Massachusetts where we're sitting? Because Massachusetts has been the leader. And any given day, there's 6,000 clinical trials happening here in our hospitals. The leader in the United States, particularly for phase 1. Now China is leading for phase 1. I had a roundtable session with 10 different biotech companies, and we were talking FDA, and all of which were located here in Massachusetts. Every single one of them was doing their first in human clinical trial outside of the United States, and not because they want to do, because it made sense from a financial perspective. And also clinical trials run outside of the United States are 12 to 18 months faster. Time is money for biotech companies, and the time is life to a patient. And so
Cuts the cost down, right?
But
Of course.
To add to that, when you have a phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trial done here, that requires people. That's a building. Those are people going to lunch. Those are people, that is the economy. That's what keeps all of this going. So I think we think about these as in these downstream ways or these abstract terms, but this is a full economy of life sciences, of research, of students coming here, students, graduate students, all of those things. That's what fuels a society and affects all of our jobs, our well-being, our industries. So that's what we miss when we think that, we're going to lose
Yeah, it's not going to impact everything.
all of the preamble and just focus on this end and it's going to be a flywheel. No, it is a whole ecosystem that supports all of us and our way.
And I just want to add one piece to that. Also for patients here in the United States, the reason why we want to innovate in the United States is because we, as patients, get first access to that therapy. When it's done somewhere else, it doesn't guarantee us first access. So that is why, from a patient perspective, it is of paramount importance we continue to lead in innovating in the United States.
We accept that as granted, almost, yeah. We have an audience question that goes back to sort of kind of the populist sentiment of being, so populist sentiment is skeptical that innovation is furthering inequality. How might we engage those politics with a vision for innovation that benefits all? How do you, I mean, we talked a little bit about that narrative or the communication challenge, but how do we?
Well, maybe I'm thinking, and correct me if you think the question is slightly different, but maybe even taking a step back, I think what I hear in that question is that the American people or people in general do not feel like the things that are happening are benefiting them. Right? How do we make sure that the investment, the actual return on that investment, the time is accessible to people?
It's great that it's creating jobs in rich cities.
That's right. Or it's great that, we hear all the headlines about the new earnings calls. We hear about the fact that certain, top 100 companies are making X number of $1 billion a quarter, what have you, right? What's also interesting, though, is that there was a recent report about kind of consumer, confidence, and I think that Eli Lilly is one of the top, favored kind of brands, if you will. My guess is part of that is because they've done the GLP-1s, they've done some of these other things, and so that brand is seen as super positive. Right. It's also one of the, highest revenue, best performing pharma companies, generally speaking. The consumer confidence in our government is very low. Maybe my congressman I really love, but Congress in general is terrible.
Sure.
Right. So we have this interest, we're all kind of, we're all imperfect, right? We have these imperfect ideas. But I think the question is still relevant. Why is it that people feel that the benefits are not more distributed? And I think it's a really good question, and it's one that I think about a lot, and I hope a lot about, please.
Yeah, I
jump
can add. So we have a faculty member here, an economist, Tariq Hassan, who talks about this idea that at times of rapid innovation, and you can see it by the number of patents that you actually, and you can even look at the complexity and the new words and patent statements to see that you have these times of rapid innovation. They require much more advanced education, and you get growing income inequality. So it's actually not surprising that at times of rapid innovation, like one that we're in right now, and growing income inequality, that people are saying, I see these many things happening, and I feel left behind. I feel as if my life isn't improving. And I think that is that is one of the fundamental challenges, especially when you have innovation that is affecting, as you said, earnings calls and the wealth of the country. But I don't think the answer is that the problem is that there is innovation. I think the issue is that when we have innovation, for example, at our institution, we use the term, the critical embrace of AI. Yes, there is AI, but there is so much that we have to critique about it and to be thoughtful about it and think about the implications with the implementation. I think that ethical component to this is a particularly important role that universities, that think tanks, that many people can play as we look at these times of rapid innovation. We are pushing back a lot on the role of the humanities, but I think this is one of the most important times to ask, what does it mean to be human, right? In a time of robots, in a time of AI, what does it mean to be human? So these are complex questions, but these are exactly the types of questions we should be asking.
I have a final question I want to get to, but one audience question that I think we can hopefully get to pretty quickly. Would you say that now the largest, newest inventions, the most impactful ones, are being created by large and medium teams instead of small teams or one person? Because we think about Alexander Graham Bell, he influenced Edwin Land. Steve Jobs wrote about Edwin Land. Like those, we think of those individuals, but is that the wrong way to think about innovation today? Is it really bigger, more complex teams and companies that are doing this?
I can give a good example, again, in the life sciences. And this is the way the system should work, right? So NIH is funding that early stage research, and then it's spinning out as a company. And so there was this company, Karuna Therapeutics, and they were focused on schizophrenia, and that's a patient population of about 3.7 million that had no new therapy for 50 years. And so they're doing the research and development. And then BMS comes in and does a partnership and is able to bring that research, that drug, to market in basically a year from acquisition because they have the infrastructure in place to do that. So it's really hard for an innovator to do every stage of that scale process from innovation, research, development through commercialization. So a healthy ecosystem here is really small, nimble, fast innovation happening at small companies with the larger resource companies coming in to partner to then bring it through faster.
Okay, it sounds like it very much is a yes and. All right, so let's be small, nimble, and fast now as we kind of end with a forward-looking question. 20 years from now, like what does the healthy American innovation ecosystem look like? Like what has to change to get there, briefly?
So I think it's a combination of, it has to be much more inclusive of a wide swath of people, partly because the problems and challenges are going to come from people and people's everyday experience. So it's much more inclusive of a wide range of people with a wide range of experience. There has to be a lot more efficiency, operational efficiency, policy efficiency, but in a way that doesn't run over the needs of everyday people.
I like
I'll
that.
Start with that.
Curiosity and execution. Yeah.
I also, that notion of what the country or what the system looks like 20 years from now, I will say, from where I sit, we're trying to figure that out. It's not actually a pie in the sky question. It actually is a question that we think about all the time. If I could say one brief thing about investing, when you invest in an asset, a lot of folks like to talk about what that hold rate or that hold number of held years are. And some folks like to say it's 3 to 7. And I disagree with that. The idea is that you're holding something, you're growing it, and then you're exiting. Well, if you're doing that responsibly, you have to think about what the next buyer is going to want, right? And if they are being responsible, they need to be thinking, well, who's going to buy that asset? So every time we think about something that is going to be durable, sustaining, increasing in value, societal, consumer, payer, what have you, you have to be thinking at least 15 years ahead. So to Dr. Gilliam's point, it's right. What are the technology disruptions that are happening today? What is a payer going to look like in that number of years? People are talking about trust busting in the news. Maybe that is where we're going. I don't know. But if it is, well, what does that look like? Who then buys the widget that was still made in a BU dorm, right, or created? We have to be thinking about that today. And so that notion of give the people what they want. Well, what do the people want, right? Who is the buyer? Who is the consumer? And so that question is now. The one thing I think on drugs we didn't get to talk about, maybe someone's going to ask this question, is what does our infrastructure look like to finance? Not the innovation, but the delivery and the actual acceptance or the utilization of the new innovation. What does that framework look like? Because it is amazing. There was, I think, something that was just recently maybe either approved or it's in a late stage trial. It's like a one dose and it cures your heart disease. It's $1 million. Great. Can you imagine? You take one pill and your heart disease is gone. That's incredible. That's so amazing. It should be celebrated. How many people in this country have heart disease? How does any one payer pay for that? So it's not necessarily what is the thing that's going to happen in 20 years. It's what is the infrastructure? Again, going back to my light switch. What needs to happen today to get us ready for that tomorrow?
Great. And Kendalle, closing.
From my perspective, I would love to see us as a holistic system incentivizing innovation. I'd love the government to have a comprehensive competitiveness package where we are continuing to invest and incentivize the earliest stages of innovation. We didn't even talk about this, but particularly for things like the rare disease community, where there's 10,000 rare diseases and only 500 have an FDA-approved therapy. So really think of it wholesale too. So not just at the research perspective, but also from the biomanufacturing and the entire infrastructure.
Well, we've heard how American innovation is a rich story, and we've heard from 3 people who are writing the story today. Can we please give this amazing panel a big hand? Thank you.
Thank you. That was fun.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Please exit the room so our event staff can prepare for the next session. Visit the Festival Hub throughout the day for more programming and information.